Hi y'all, I'm Deborah. Welcome to my channel. If you've been before, welcome back. So happy 2023. Hope this is going to start out and be a better year for everybody. Hope everybody has a happy start to the new year. So I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of where my channel is going and what my reading plans are, because I have a passion for telling stories and for sharing stories, and a lot of my content up to this point has been project panning content, and I still intend to do some of that. My collection is not near the size it was when I started panning, so I will be strategically choosing projects, but there is an unlimited supply of story in our world. And so my channel is going to be shifting this year more towards storytelling and sharing books and literature, because that is kind of where I find the most joy. Even in the project panning that I do, the makeup panning that I do, I tend to join projects where there's an opportunity for me to tell a story. So I've really thought about that and have decided to kind of shift the focus of my channel away from so much, I don't know, beauty stuff as to books and stories, because they interest me more long term. And it's really just where I enjoy spending more time. So, what I'd like to talk to you about today is 23 books that I want to read in 2023, as well as a couple of other little goals, maybe smaller goals, but things that I would like to read in 2023. Am I going to read more than 23 books in 2023? Absolutely. But these are bigger reads some of them are big reads that I've committed to, and kind of want to plant my flag on this hill and say, these are things that I want to read. So I will just start down the list. So some of these are going to be buddy reads with my kids, mostly my son, because my daughter will do some buddy reads. Rachel and I will do some buddy reads too, but David and I have a couple of special things that we've planned. So the first on my list, and I'm not reading these in these particular order, they're just on the list that I wrote them down, is Don Quixote. This is the translation by Edith Grossman. This is really considered the first modern novel. It has a lot of, it's really funny. It's really funny. When you start to read it, it is an older form of language, but with this new translation, puts it in I think it still respects the tone of the author, but puts it into a framework that more modern readers will understand, or will engage with better. So this is number one on my list of 23 things I would like to read in 2023. The second one is another big read, and this is The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky. I will just read the little blurb for those of you who are unfamiliar with these stories. I guess I should do that with Don Quixote too, but we'll see. So for the blurb on the back of the book, for those of you not familiar with the story, murder of a brutal landowner, Fyodor Karamazov, changes the lives of his sons irrevocably. Mitya, the sensualist whose bitter rivalry with his father immediately places him under suspicion for patricide. Ivan, the intellectual, driven to a breakdown. The spiritual Alyosha, who tries to heal the family's rifts. And the shadowy figure of their illegitimate half-brother, Smerdyakov. Dostoevsky's dark masterwork evokes a world where the lines between innocence and corruption, good and evil, blur, and everyone's faith in humanity is tested. So this one is on the list for 2023. All right, so the next two books are Don Quixote is a buddy read with my son, and then the next two books are also probably going to be buddy reads, or at least discussion topics for discussion, because it's really funny. He gifted me both of these for Christmas. which is actually really funny because I gifted him the same books for Christmas. So we took that as a sign that if we're buying each other the same books, then we should probably read them together. So the first one is by Anthony Doerr, Cloud Cuckoo Land. This is his newest release. So I'm just going to read the blurb on the back of this one. In the 15th century, an orphan named Anna lives inside the formidable walls of Constantinople. She learns to read, and in this ancient city, famous for its libraries, she finds what may be the last copies of a centuries-old book. The story of Aethon, who turns out to be a bird, who longs to be turned into a bird, so that he can fly to a utopian paradise in the sky. Outside the walls is Omer, a village boy conscripted with his beloved oxen into the army that will lay siege to the city. His paths and Anna will cross. In the present day, the library in Idaho, octogenarian Zeno rehearses children in a play adaptation of the story, preserved against all odds through the centuries. Tucked among the library shelves is a bomb, planted by an idealistic, troubled teenager, Seymour. This is yet another siege. And in a not-so-distant future, on the interstellar ship Argos, Constance is alone in a vault, copying on scraps of sacking the story of Aethon told by her father. So there's a story, and it gets shared in 3 different time periods. So this will actually be very interesting to read, to see how Mr. Doerr connects these stories together and what the relationships are in these 3 different time periods. So that is Cloud Cuckoo Land. That is the first one on our out of those 2. And then the next one is Demon Copperhead. And this is Barbara Kingsolver's latest book. This one is a story of a boy who has a teenage single mom, says no assets beyond his dead father's good looks and copper-colored hair, caustic wit, and a fierce talent for survival. This is kind of a story set in southern Appalachia. Mom is a teenage mom with a drug problem, and her son is shuttled between foster care and in and out of the system. And trying to find his way through a system for keeps people impoverished. However you want to look at this. This is a kind of a reimagining of the David Copperfield story, which actually is also on my list as well. So David Copperfield and Demon Copperhead. While this one will be a buddy read with my son, I will follow one of these with the other one. Just depends on what order we decide to read, to coordinate our reading. So David Copperfield, one of Dickens' most famous works, really is about a boy in and out of workhouses, in and out of poverty, mostly in poverty. Looks at child labor, looks at the debtor system in 19th century England. So I think this will be a good pairing to Miss Kingsolver's book. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. Moving on, next book I would like to read is Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. This one has been on my shelf for quite a while, and I have not put the time in to read it because every time I start reading it, I start singing, and then it disappears into the musical. This has been made over and over into many different versions of the movie, but I want to go back to the original. And like I said, this has been on my shelf for years, literally decades. I bought this when my son was a baby, and he is well grown. So it's high time I read this book. So that one is there. All right, so the next one is also a Dostoevsky book. This is Crime and Punishment. It is time to read this one. I've been looking at it and looking at it. This is actually a murder story. You know right in the beginning that there is a murder. You know who did it, but it's all about what happens next. And sometimes those make for some of the best ways of looking at crime fiction is what are the repercussions and what happens to the people who commit the crime. What happens next. What is the moral dilemma? So on the back of this one it says Rodion Raskolnikov, sorry, had to look at that one a minute. Raskolnikov is handsome yet impoverished student. Morally conflicted, he believes that extraordinary men who contribute much to society by their thinking are above the law. And in order to prove his theory, he decides to murder a grasping old moneylender and, through unforeseen circumstances, her sister. Unexpectedly filled with remorse, Raskolnikov is caught in a moral dilemma. While he believes he can get away with the perfect murder, he also finds his conscience challenged by his developing relationship with the beautiful but deeply religious Sonia. So, looking forward to that one too. Yeah, looking forward to that one. Looking forward to all of these actually. So I've got this big stack over here, and I've got another big stack over here. So I decided to put there are some of them are classic, some of them are more modern, as you can see. On my list is Babel by R.F. Kuang. This is a new book. This was my book of the month selection for December. This is sometimes it's referred to, if you'll find it in lists of dark academia, but it's also kind of an urban fantasy or historical fantasy, probably more historical fantasy. The premise of this takes place in 1828, so it would be historical fantasy. But the world in which this takes place at Oxford, but it takes place in a world where language is magical. And in translating languages, things from one language to another, magic happens. And to some extent, yeah, magic does happen when we use words. Words have power. Even in our rather mundane seeming world, words have power. But in this book, they have a more tangible output, magical output. So that one will be on the list. Also, Atlas 6 by Olive E. Blake. This one came out in 2021. Her sequel to this one just came out this year as well, called The Atlas Paradox. That one will probably be on some other later lists, but not on the top 20, on the 23 I've promised to. For this book, the blurb says, each decade, only 6 most uniquely talented magicians are selected to earn a place in the Alexandrian Society, the foremost secret society in the world. So that's part of what you see in dark academia is secrets, occult, elitism, academic setting. Each of the newest recruits has their reasons for accepting, even if it means growing closer than they could have imagined to their most dangerous enemies or risking unforgivable betrayal from their most trusted allies. They will fight tooth and nail to join the ranks of the Alexandrians. So this one is definitely on the list for this year. All right, then I'm pulling up a few American works. I've decided that in July, it's July 4th, Independence Day, I would put in some American authors for the month of July. And like I said, I will, who knows, I may read these before July gets here and have to put something else in. But the first book that I have on here is House of Seven Gables by Nathaniel Hawthorne. I really like Nathaniel Hawthorne. The Scarlet Letter is one of my favorite novels, and so I thought I would give his Gothic a read. Let's see, we've got greed, treachery, mesmerism, and murder are just some of the bricks Hawthorne uses to build the House of Seven Gables. Generations before the present story begins, wealthy Colonel Pynchon covets Matthew Mole's land. Coveting is bad. Thou shalt not covet. When Mole is hanged for witchcraft, he puts a curse on the colonel and all of his descendants. So we have a murder, we have a curse, we have a half-mad nephew, a scowling niece, we have poverty, we have a distant cousin who becomes the ray of hope. So, House of Seven Gables. Next, I have on here All the Pretty Horses by Cormac McCarthy. I don't know, I've kind of backed away from reading Cormac McCarthy, I think because The Road just freaked me out so much. The movie, The Road, just kind of, it was just so dark that I had backed away. But I really need, he's an important American author, and I want to make sure that I am not missing something. One piece of work does not make the entire opus. So I want to make sure that, so I went back to this one. National Book Award winner, All the Pretty Horses. It is the first volume of a trilogy. Tells the story of John Grady Cole, the last of a long line of Texas ranchers. Across the border, Mexico beckons, beautiful and desolate, rugged and cruelly civilized. With two companions, he sets off on an idyllic, sometimes comic adventure to a place where dreams are paid for in blood. So, I promise I'm going to read a Cormac McCarthy this year. We'll see. All right, then the third of the great American authors. I wanted to read Stephen King. I've never really been a Stephen King fan. I'm not a big horror fan. I like more gothic horror. I don't like gratuitous horror. I spent 30 years as an OR, ER, ICU nurse. Blood and guts doesn't, I don't need authors to imagine what terrible things people can do to each other. I've spent 30 years looking at it. And so horror in and of itself for horror's sake doesn't appeal to me. I like the thriller component of it. But this is a book that Mr. King released this year. It's called A Fairy Tale, and it really does seem more kind of urban fantasy than, is certainly not, I wouldn't consider, from the description of the story, I would not consider it horror. But just to look over the description, Charlie Reed looks like a regular high school kid, great at baseball, football, a decent student, but he carries a heavy load. His mom was killed in a hit and run when he was 7, and grief drove his dad to drink. Charlie learned how to take care of himself and his dad. When he is 17, he meets a dog named Radar and her aging master, Howard Bowditch, a recluse in a big house at the top of a hill with a locked shed in the backyard. Sometimes strange sounds come from it. Charlie starts doing odd jobs for Mr. Bowditch and loses his heart to Radar. Then when Bowditch dies, he leaves Charlie a cassette tape, telling a story no one would believe. What Bowditch knows and has kept a secret all of his long life is that the shed is a portal to another world. So, interesting. I'm actually really excited to see how this story turns out, what goes with that story. All right, so after that one, I decided I would dive a little bit more back into some of the classics. This is, believe it or not, I have never read Pride and Prejudice. I know I'm the only person on the planet, I think, that hasn't read Pride and Prejudice. I actually picked this up at the Methodist yard sale. So found a nice little hardback copy. But I'm excited about it. So Pride and Prejudice, that's on the list. And then I decided, I have looked at the nice leather bounds and gilded edges on my bookshelf in the other room and decided I should be reading those books because they're they're decorative, but they're books. They have words, they have power. And so I decided I should be pulling some of those books off and reading them as well. So I have pulled off the Iliad and the Odyssey. This is the Samuel Butler translation. It is the prose translation. It is not translated as a poem. The best, I think, the modern translation that's best known, that is poetry driven, like the original, would be the Fagles translations. But these were Butler translated these back around 1900, I do believe. But it's I actually prefer the prose to the poetry at this point. I just want to read the story. I don't want to worry about the rest of it. I just want to read the story. So the Iliad is the story of Achilles, it's basically an entire book of Achilles being mad because Agamemnon had to give up his concubine that he had stolen, and so he took Achilles' woman, and Achilles got mad. And that's, most of the book is Achilles' rage about it. In fact, the entire first paragraph says, "Sing, O goddess, the anger of Achilles, son of Peleus, that brought countless ills upon the Achaeans." So it tells you right there in the first sentence that this is about Achilles being mad. And so that's but in a broader perspective, it is the story of Helen of Troy and Paris and the sacking of Troy. But it's mostly about Achilles being mad. Then the second part is the Odyssey. And the Odyssey is the story of Odysseus, one of the generals, who is gets lost at sea on the way home. And it's about his journey back home and the people he meets, the monsters he fights, and the state of things at home when he gets home to find them. So Iliad and the Odyssey, these are on my list. And as a follow-up to those two, I am pulling in the reimagining Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This is it's a follow-up story to the Iliad. And then the other one that she wrote is Circe. And Circe is a character that shows up in the Odyssey. So reading those together, those four books together, seems to make a lot of sense. At least it did in my head when I said it. All right, so next would be Catcher in the Rye. That is on the list. 1984 by George Orwell is on the list. Then We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. I've been wanting to read this. I just haven't gotten around to it. But I'm very interested in this book. This is a story about two young women who have, my name is Mary Catherine Blackwood. I'm 18 years old and live with my sister. And it ends goes through a list of things that she likes, things that she doesn't, and ends with everyone else in my family is dead. So kind of a very mysterious young lady on the cover of the book. So definitely want to read that one. Another read that my son and I have talked about, and I think I don't know that it'll be a buddy read, but it would just maybe, both happen to read it in the same year, is 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. So that one is on the list. And then another one of my leatherbounds, The Lost World by Arthur Conan Doyle. I'm a big Sherlock Holmes fan. I love short stories. I love mysteries. I love the suspense of it. This is not any of those things. Okay, This has been made into a movie several different times. This is actually a story of, it's an adventure story. And in this adventure, there is a journalist who meets up with an explorer, and it turns out that this explorer has found dinosaurs living on this plateau in the Amazon, and it's about this lost area of the world for adventure. So I am looking forward to reading that one. And then book number 23 brings it back to my affection for dark academia with If We Were Villains. And so this is one of it. It's down here on my dark academia section right here with the secret history and ninth house and the maidens, and it, in my dreams I hold a knife, and Babel will live up there, and it's that section of the bookshelf. So for this one, this takes place at a conservatory and acting school with 7 Shakespearean students. Let's see. On the day Oliver Marks is released from jail, the man who put him there is waiting at the door. Detective wants to know the truth, and after 10 years, Oliver is finally ready to tell it. So you immediately know that there has been a murder. Someone has gone to prison for it, but we don't know the story, and the story unfolds from there. So I'm looking forward to getting to this book. So those are the 23 books that I want to read in 2023. So for my other reading goals this year, I would like to read the Bible through. I would like to read a poem every day, or as many days of reading a poem a day as possible. And I would like to read 100 short stories over the course of the year. I think that's doable. I think that's perfectly doable. All right, so those are my goals. What do you plan on reading this year? What kind of reading goals do you have? Anything interest you in the stack? Anything you've read and said, I hate it, don't waste your time on that, pick something else. Let me know. Send me a message down below. I'd love to hear from you. If you're interested in content like this, click subscribe, hit notify, all the things down there. And I will look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Thanks. Bye.